Episode 4, the budgeting process, planning your spending. So we've seen in previous episodes the impact of not managing your debt properly, not having clear financial goals, a real purpose for where your money should go, and the impact of overspending. In this episode, we'll have a look at how do we now create a practical future that speaks to the financial future we'd like to see at the end of the day. And of course, it makes sense to tell your money where it should go. And that we do through a budget. So where do we start? We start by keeping track of our expenses, and we discussed this in a previous episode. So at the end of each day, you would basically pull together all of your spending on that day. And that is the start of creating a budget, because if you do that over a consistent period and you get to say at the end of the month, you can really see where your money is going, what you are spending on, and where perhaps you can cut. The next step is then to work on your budget. So what is a budget? A budget is really an assessment of your income and your expenditure. Just two sides that you need to consider. Your income, for most of us, is considered quite finite. We're quite clear on the salary we get every month unless we have other income coming in. So that would be the one thing you would jot down. And then the second thing would be to have a look at your expenses. So we have generally three categories of expenses. The first one being the fixed expenses that don't really vary month to month. The second one, the variable expenses, which is really where we have the opportunity to control how we deal with our money and what we can do differently. And the third area, which is really known as the one that takes away from the normal budget, is the periodic expenses. That's your geyser burst, or the change of the tires, or the medical excess that you suddenly need to pay and wasn't planned in your original budget. So those periodic expenses, those ones we don't generally expect, how do we fund them when ready cash is not available? Isn't that the time that we then go to the cash loan or to some other financial institution to get money? Money that we need quickly, generally urgently, and therefore we seem quite desperate in terms of how we will get it. But thereafter, we need to find a way to pay it back. What we should do is have what we call a spending plan, because we don't want to place that much strain on our disposable income. A spending plan is a way to look at planning your expenses before they actually come in, so at the beginning of the month. So you would estimate where you expect to end at the end of that month. And that would be the basis of your spending plan. So let's imagine it's the end of January. Your salary is just dropping for the month of February, and you take that time to actually jot down where you expect to end by the end of the month. So that's going to be your estimate column. You'll complete your estimate column on your spending plan to get a sense of, this is what I expect to pay over the month. And then remember, you are now tracking your expenses. So as you track them every day, by the end of the month, you have a clear picture on what your actual spending was. You can use that document, whether you took it in terms of a notebook, whether it was on a spending app, and that would then help you to now complete the actual column, which gives you an opportunity to compare what you estimated you would spend at the beginning of the month versus what you actually spent by the end of the month. And from there, you have an opportunity moving into the next month and the next month to make the necessary changes to your budget or to your spending plan that would work for you. What are the kinds of budgeting tools that we could use? There are many websites that you can access to find different budgeting templates and tools to help you manage your finances. You need to answer questions such as, what's a good measure of how much you need to spend on your debt? How much can you afford to apply to your debt repayments? How much should you be allocating to your monthly spending? Are you saving anything? And if so, what's a good amount to put away? You need to be able to put something away for a rainy day. What are some of the rules that we could use as a basis for our budget? Now, one of the best known ones is called the 50-30-20 rule. It basically describes that you would use 50% of your disposable income to cater for your needs, 30% would go towards your wants, and 20% would go towards saving and debt. So how do we qualify the difference between needs and wants? When you're looking at your needs, you are looking at what are those things that you require in order to survive. And there are very few. It's basically your shelter, your food, your clothing, and a few more. But your survival needs are minimum. And that would be where you would apply 50% of your income. 30% would go towards your wants. Those are the areas that are fun to have, where we can really play around and focus on those things that really make our hearts sing. but only 30% of that can go, or 30% of your budget can go towards that. And 20% is relative to your savings and your debt. So this is the 50-30-20 rule, which is pretty well known, and you can find a lot more information on this budget rule online. The second one is what we call the 70-20-10 rule. 70% of your income is allocated towards spending, 20% is allocated towards savings, and about 10% would then go to your debt or to your donations. Perhaps you are in that situation where you are actually able to allow your dollar to make a difference for others. Now, it's a really good tool if you're just planning to start budgeting or looking at, one of the foundational tools for budgeting, but it does have some shortcomings. And one of the biggest shortcomings is that it actually does not separate your discretionary spending from your necessary spending. And from a psychological perspective, it's extremely important to understand that difference of what is it that I need to have, such as I need to have clothing, versus what is it that I would want to have, such as a luxury brand of clothing, which is very different from just making sure that I am covered. These are some of the ways that one can make something that seems rather complicated, such as budgeting, quite simple. But please remember that simple is not synonymous with easy. It is going to require you to keep at this exercise for at least 2 to 3 months so that you have a good handle on what your spending looks like over a period of time. Once you have a good handle on your spending plan, you only really need to review it when you have a significant change either in your income or your expenses that then requires you to go back and have a look at it from scratch and just apply the rules once again in a way that has it work with the new income or the new expenses. Wishing you all the best, much luck, and see you next time.